It was a calm night in rural Arizona, the kind of night where the sky looked clear enough to see every star. The desert was quiet, with only a light warm breeze moving through the dry grass and cactus plants. Most people in the area were asleep, and nothing unusual ever happened there. But on this night, something strange and unexpected began to unfold high above the earth at first. It was only a small point of light in the sky, something that could easily be mistaken for a shooting star. But within seconds, the point of light grew bigger, brighter and hotter. It moved fast, too fast to be anything natural. The color of the light changed from white to orange and then to a deep, burning red. It screamed across the atmosphere like a burning comet in a small neighborhood near the desert. A man named Daniel was closing his shop for the day. As he locked the door and stepped outside, he noticed the light. He stopped walking, confused. It was falling toward the ground, leaving a long trail of fire behind it. Daniel's first thought was that maybe a plane was crashing. He froze for a moment and then quickly pulled out his phone to record it. Before he could even press the record button, the fiery object exploded into 3 separate pieces. 2 pieces vanished behind distant hills, but the largest one kept falling straight toward the desert. People all over the nearby towns began stepping out of their houses. Dogs barked loudly. Alarms went off in cars. The ground lightly trembled as the burning mass moved lower and lower. A few miles away, an old couple sitting on their porch stared at it silently, unable to believe their eyes. A group of teenagers camping for the night stopped roasting marshmallows and stood up, panic slowly rising inside them. No one knew what exactly they were looking at, but everyone understood one thing: it was coming down fast, and whatever it was big. Finally, with a blinding flash of white light, the object slammed into the desert floor. The impact echoed across miles, sending a shockwave that rattled windows and shook dust off rooftops. The ground shuddered like a small earthquake. A huge cloud of sand and debris rose into the air, glowing from the fire beneath it. For a moment, the desert looked like a war zone. A faint orange glow lit up the horizon. The sound was so loud that people instinctively covered their ears. For several seconds after the crash, everything became silent again. The quiet returned slowly, as if the desert was unsure if it should breathe normally again. Then the first wave of curiosity hit. People started calling 911. Some got into their trucks and started driving toward the crash site. Others stood on hills and tried to see what had fallen. Daniel was one of the first to reach the area. He drove his old pickup truck along the dirt road at full speed, guided by the rising pillar of smoke. As he got closer, he noticed the smell of burning metal in the air. A warm wind blew across his face. He parked a little distance away and ran on foot toward the crash. When he reached the edge of the impact crater, he stopped again, this time from shock. The crater was enormous. The earth looked torn apart, as if a giant hand had scooped out a huge piece of soil. In the middle of the crater, half buried in the sand and glowing red-hot, was a large object that definitely wasn't a meteor. It was shaped like a ship, not a human ship, not something built by any army on Earth. Its surface was made of a strange silver metal that looked like it was melting and repairing itself at the same time. Pieces of the hull flickered with blue lights. Sparks jumped out from ripped wires. A low humming sound came from deep inside the vessel, as if some machine was still trying to keep it alive. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He whispered to himself, This can't be real." Within minutes, more people arrived, farmers, travelers, and local residents who followed the smoke. They stood around the crater, whispering to one another. Some took out their phones to record videos, though many were too shocked to move. The air was hot, and the ground under their feet was slowly cooling from the impact. Suddenly, a loud cracking noise came from inside the damaged ship. Everyone jumped back in fear. A panel on the side of the craft began to shift. It moved slowly at first, like something was pushing from the inside. The sparks flew again. The metal bent outward. People didn't know whether to run or stay. Some took a few steps back, their hearts pounding. Others held their breath, waiting for whatever was inside to come out. The panel finally snapped open, releasing a burst of smoke. A moment later, a figure stumbled out of the ship. It wasn't human. It was tall, thin, and covered in deep cuts and burns. Its skin was a pale blue color. Its eyes were large and dark, filled with fear, not threat, just fear. It collapsed halfway out of the ship, struggling to breathe. A woman standing nearby screamed. Someone else shouted, "What is that?" But Daniel didn't run. He felt something inside him, a strange mix of shock, worry, and instinct. He climbed down into the crater, ignoring the heat. When he reached the creature, he noticed it was shaking, its hands stretched out weakly as if asking for help. Daniel realized that whatever this being was, it was hurt and frightened. "It's okay," Daniel said softly, even though he had no idea if it could understand him. "I won't hurt you." More movement came from inside the ship. Another figure appeared, smaller this time, almost child-sized. Then a third, and a fourth. All of them looked injured, exhausted, and frightened. They were struggling to escape from the wreckage. Some limped, some crawled, some clutched their chests in pain. There were at least 10 of them, maybe more. The crowd above the crater gasped as they realized these weren't invaders or monsters. They looked like refugees. Their expressions showed fear and hopelessness. Some held hands like families trying to stay together. A few carried younger ones in their arms. These weren't soldiers or warriors. These were people who had been running from something terrible. One of the smaller aliens tripped and fell. Daniel rushed toward it and helped it stand. Even though it was shaking, the creature didn't fight back. It leaned on him, trusting him in that moment. Seeing Daniel help them made a few others brave enough to come closer. A retired nurse who lived nearby joined him and began checking injuries. A man with a flashlight signaled toward others to bring water bottles. Without discussing it, people started helping. It was like a quiet understanding passed through the crowd that these beings needed saving. But the situation wasn't safe. The ship continued making strange noises. The ground around it cracked. The air smelled of burning chemicals. Someone shouted that the ship might explode. Another person insisted they needed to call authorities immediately. Someone else worried about contamination or diseases. Before the group could decide what to do next, the sound of distant helicopters filled the air. People looked up. Black military helicopters approached fast, their searchlights scanning the desert. A few trucks and armored vehicles also appeared on the horizon, kicking up dust as they sped toward the site. Within minutes, soldiers surrounded the area and shouted for everyone to move back. The civilians had no choice but to step away from the crater. Some protested, saying they were trying to help, but the soldiers quickly established a perimeter, pushing the crowd far from the crash site. Daniel didn't want to leave the injured alien he was holding, but two soldiers gently took over and guided him away. He watched helplessly as the military moved in. Doctors in protective suits began rushing toward the aliens. Some checked their breathing and injuries, while others tried to communicate with hand gestures. The aliens seemed terrified at the sight of the uniforms and weapons. A few recoiled, thinking they might be taken prisoner, but one of the medics removed her helmet, showed her face, and gestured kindly that she wanted to help. The aliens slowly relaxed when they saw the gentle expressions of the medical team. The officials didn't have time to argue or ask questions. They lifted the refugees on stretchers and carried them toward temporary medical tents that had already been set up near the trucks. The wrecked ship continued to spark behind them, its lights flickering like it might shut down permanently. The soldiers spoke in quick, urgent voices, calling for reinforcements, containment teams, engineers, and scientists. It was clear that this was no ordinary emergency. As the refugees were escorted away, Daniel and others who had witnessed the crash were ordered to step back even farther. They were told not to speak to anyone about what they had seen. Some soldiers even took their phones temporarily to check if they had recorded anything. But despite all the fear and confusion, Daniel felt something else too, a deep sense of responsibility. He couldn't shake the image of the terrified, injured beings clutching each other, desperate for safety. He realized that whatever had happened to them, they were not enemies. They were victims of something bigger, something dangerous. And although the government had now taken control of the situation, Daniel knew one thing for sure. He would never forget the look in their eyes. As the night passed, more officials arrived, and the crash site was sealed off completely. The once quiet desert had transformed into a restricted zone filled with flashing lights, machinery, and armed guards. The world outside remained unaware of the truth. But the people who had witnessed the crash understood that something extraordinary had entered their lives, something that would change everything. And for the aliens who had crash-landed injured, frightened, and exhausted, the planet they had fallen onto was nothing like the ones they had encountered before. They didn't know it yet, but the humans who found them would become their first real hope, their unexpected protectors in a universe that had offered them nothing but fear. The crash site in the Arizona desert became a different world by the time morning touched the horizon. What was once a quiet place filled with sand, shrubs, and silence had turned into a busy zone filled with flashing lights, loud engines, tents, soldiers, and scientists moving in every direction. The night had been full of shock and fear, but the morning brought something else: questions. Too many questions, and almost no answers. The aliens who survived the crash lay on stretchers inside large medical tents, surrounded by doctors and nurses. Some were still unconscious, breathing softly with weak chests that rose and fell as if every breath was a fight. Others were awake but too scared to move. Their large dark eyes followed every human who entered the tent. They didn't know who these people were. They didn't know if they would be rescued or hurt. All they knew was that they were no longer flying through space, running from a nightmare. They were on a strange planet filled with strange beings. Outside the medical tent, the soldiers stood in perfect rows, guarding every corner. Their guns were lowered but ready. They weren't sure what danger they were facing, but they had been trained for every situation, including the possibility of something never seen before. Still, they were nervous. Most of them had never imagined they would see aliens in real life. Some whispered to each other about what this could mean. Others kept their eyes on the desert, trying to act calm even though their hearts were racing. Meanwhile, government officials walked through the scene with serious faces. They spoke in low voices through radios and phones. They discussed isolation protocols, decontamination, national security issues, and how to keep the entire event hidden from the public until they knew what was happening. They didn't want panic across the world. They needed information. Who were these beings? Were they dangerous? Were more like them coming? Inside the tent, one of the aliens, a small, childlike one with pale blue skin, opened its eyes and tried to sit up. A nurse immediately rushed over and gently pushed it back down. She wasn't wearing a helmet or full suit anymore. She had removed it to make them feel less threatened. She slowly placed a hand on her chest and said softly, "You are safe." The alien didn't understand the words, but it seemed to understand the tone. It looked at her carefully, its body shaking with confusion and fear. Another alien, older and taller, lay on a stretcher nearby. He watched the nurse with worried eyes. He didn't know if humans were telling the truth or pretending to be kind before doing something terrible. This had happened before on other planets. They had been hunted, captured, or used as bargaining pieces. He wanted to protect the younger ones, but he was too weak to move. Outside the tent, the sun climbed higher, creating long shadows across the desert sand. Helicopters continued to land, bringing more specialists. Scientists in lab coats walked toward the ship's wreckage. They were excited and terrified at the same time. They had dreamed of finding alien life one day, but not like this. Not in a broken ship full of refugees who looked more scared than dangerous. The scientists soon found something surprising. The ship wasn't made for battle. It had no heavy weapons, no armor designed for war. Instead, most of its design suggested it was a transport ship, one used to carry civilian families, not soldiers. This discovery changed everything for the humans. It meant the aliens were likely not attackers. They were not here to invade Earth. They were simply running from something. And they had crash-landed by accident in a nearby command tent. High-ranking officials gathered around a table covered with maps, satellite photos, and reports. The air inside the tent was thick with tension. Generals, intelligence officers, and government representatives argued quietly among themselves. One general said, "We must prepare for the worst. If these beings came here, others might follow and the next group might not be peaceful." Another officer disagreed. "Look at them. These aren't soldiers, they're families. They're wounded. We shouldn't treat them like enemies." A scientist stepped forward and placed a tablet on the table showing the medical conditions of the aliens. "They have burns, fractures, oxygen poisoning, and signs of long-term stress. These people didn't come here to attack, they came here to survive." Still, no one could relax. Earth had never encountered anything like this. Every decision they made could change the future of humanity forever. Should they protect these beings? Should they hide them? Should they try to communicate? Or should they treat them as potential threats until they understood more? Hours passed as humans worked around the crash site. The ship continued to spark and smoke, its metal groaning as if it was still alive and trying to fix itself. Engineers carefully approached, scanning it with machines and taking samples. They were fascinated by the technology. Some parts of the ship moved like liquid metal. Other parts glowed with an energy humans had never seen before. But every discovery raised more questions. Back inside the medical tent, the aliens were slowly calming down. The doctors had given them water, cleaned their wounds and placed warm blankets over them because their bodies shivered in the Earth's cooler air. One of the younger aliens reached out and gently touched a nurse's hand. She froze for a moment, then smiled softly and let the alien hold her fingers. Their skin felt cool and smooth. It was a strange but peaceful moment. The older alien watched this scene and felt something he had not felt in a long time. Hope, real hope. Not the fake kind they told themselves while running from planet to planet, but hope that maybe this new world would not treat them the way others had. Maybe they had fallen onto a planet where kindness still existed. As the day continued, translators were brought in. Even though no human language could communicate with the aliens yet, scientists tried using symbols, drawings, hand gestures, anything that could break the barrier. For hours, they tried simple communication. A scientist showed a picture of Earth. The aliens looked at it curiously. One of them tilted its head, trying to understand. Then the scientist showed a picture of their crashed ship. The aliens reacted immediately. They became tense, their breathing fast, their eyes wide with fear. The older alien tried to sit up, pointing weakly at the picture and then shaking his head. He pressed his hand against his chest, signaling distress. The scientists realized that whatever had happened before the crash was not just an accident, it was something terrible. By afternoon, the government officials received a full report. The aliens had no weapons. Their ship was old and damaged long before the crash. Their injuries suggested they had escaped violence somewhere else. The conclusion was becoming clear. They were refugees, but the officials still had to be careful. If the aliens were running from a threat, then maybe that threat could come to Earth. The thought filled everyone with fear. If these beings were hunted, then Earth might now be in danger simply because they landed here in the evening. Representatives from the government finally entered the medical tent to speak with the aliens. They moved slowly, respectfully, not wanting to scare them. They sat down a few feet away to show they meant no harm. The aliens watched closely. Some trembled. Others hid behind the older ones. An interpreter held up a device that projected simple images. The first image showed a human hand above a heart, a universal sign for peace. The aliens stared at it. One of them lightly tapped its own chest near the heart area, trying to mimic the gesture. It wasn't perfect, but it showed trust starting to grow. Then the humans showed an image of a family, parents and children together. The aliens reacted strongly. Their eyes softened. Some pointed at the picture and then at themselves, confirming that they too had families among them. The humans nodded gently, showing they understood. Then came the hardest image: a planet burning, ships attacking, and beings running for their lives. It was not a real picture, just a simple drawing to ask the question, were you running from danger? The older alien closed his eyes tightly, shaking as memories flooded back. Then he slowly nodded. A single tear fell from the corner of his eye, sliding down his pale blue cheek. The humans watching understood the message clearly. These beings were not here by choice. They were escaping something horrible. They needed safety, but giving them safety meant something bigger. It meant Earth had to take a stand. If the aliens' enemies came looking for them, Earth might be forced into a fight it had never expected. Night began to fall again. The desert cooled. The stars reappeared above, shining quietly as if watching everything unfold. The aliens lay in their beds, exhausted but less afraid than before. The humans monitoring them felt something too, a sense of responsibility. These beings might not speak English or understand Earth's culture, but their fear, pain, and need for help were universal. And slowly, something important began to happen. The first instinct of the humans present, the soldiers, doctors, nurses, scientists, and locals who saw the crash, was not to harm the aliens, not to imprison them, not to treat them like monsters. Their first instinct was to help. It was a small thing, a very small thing, but it was the beginning of something that no one on Earth fully understood yet. Humanity had taken its first step toward becoming a shield for those who could not defend themselves. The desert had become quieter by the next morning, but not calmer. Deep inside the temporary base that surrounded the crashed alien ship, tension hung in the air like thick smoke. Soldiers still guarded every entrance. Scientists still moved from tent to tent carrying equipment, and doctors continued checking on the alien survivors. But something new was happening now, something that would change everything. The government wanted answers. They needed to know who these beings were, where they came from, and most importantly, what or who they were running from. The aliens themselves were still weak, still frightened, and still unsure if they could trust the humans completely. But after a full day of being treated kindly, a small part of them began to relax. They understood the humans didn't intend to harm them. That made it possible for communication to finally begin. Inside one of the larger medical tents, the air was warm and filled with the quiet hum of medical machines. A long table had been set up with pictures, symbols, tablets, and devices that the scientists hoped would help break the language barrier. 3 aliens, including the older one who had guided the others out of the wrecked ship, were now awake enough to sit upright. They looked nervous but willing to try. The scientists approached slowly. One of them, a middle-aged woman with calm eyes, held a tablet with pictures drawn on it. She gently pointed to the first image, a star system. The alien watched it carefully. Then she pointed to Earth, a blue circle. The alien's dark eyes flickered as it recognized that this was the planet they had crashed on. It reached out and touched the image lightly with its long, thin fingers. Then the scientist showed a new picture, a ship moving through space. The alien nodded weakly. It placed its hand on its own chest, then pointed toward the drawing, indicating that this was their journey. The scientists exchanged hopeful glances. It was working. Then came the difficult part. The scientists switched the image to one showing their ship taking damage, breaking apart, and falling. As soon as the alien looked at it, its body tensed. Its breathing quickened. Its fingers curled slightly, a sign of fear. The scientist paused, not wanting to push too fast. She gently placed a hand over her heart again and nodded, signaling that they were not forcing anything. The alien took a slow breath. Then it nodded back. It reached toward the picture and tapped on the part showing explosions. It lifted its hand, curled 2 fingers tightly, then opened them wide like something breaking apart. That gesture was painful for it to make, but it was trying to explain. Another scientist quickly sketched a simple image of 2 different groups, one group attacking, the other escaping. The alien stared at it, then slowly pointed to the larger group doing the attacking. Its hand trembled. Then it pointed at itself and the other refugees. This was clear. They had been running from an enemy. The older alien closed its eyes for a moment, as if remembering something that hurt too much to think about. When it opened them again, tears formed inside, though they didn't fall. It raised one shaking hand and pressed it against its forehead. Then it moved the hand forward with a trembling motion. The scientists wrote down every gesture, trying to understand. Does that mean they were driven out? One scientist whispered. Or attacked suddenly. Another replied softly. To confirm. They drew a simple picture of a peaceful planet, then another image of the same planet being destroyed. When the older alien saw that, its entire body stiffened. It put its hand over its heart, then over the picture of the destroyed planet. Then it looked away, unable to keep staring. The meaning hit the humans like a punch to the chest. Their home was gone. The refugees weren't travelers. They weren't explorers who had gone off course. They were survivors of something terrible, something violent, destructive, and merciless. The scientists quietly called for the officials outside to come in. When the generals and government representatives entered the tent, they were met with the sight of the aliens trembling, trying their best to explain the tragedy they had escaped. The officials listened, silent and tense. Then something unexpected happened. One of the younger aliens, still weak but awake, crawled closer to the older one. It rested its head against his arm, seeking comfort like a scared child. The older alien wrapped one thin arm around the younger one protectively. The humans watching felt something shift inside them. This wasn't an enemy. This wasn't a threat. These were families, parents, children, survivors of a war that had taken everything from them. A translator stepped forward to try another method. He used a device that played simple tones and light patterns meant to represent emotions. He pressed a button for fear. The device glowed red. The aliens reacted immediately, tapping the red light rapidly. They repeated the gesture over and over, showing that fear had been a constant part of their lives. Then the translator pressed a button that showed a picture of a large, dark ship approaching. The aliens froze. Some trembled. The older one pointed at the scary image with a shaking hand. He then placed both hands on his head and lowered them slowly, a clear sign of danger or doom. The humans exchanged worried looks. They now understood something even more frightening. Whoever had attacked these aliens might still be looking for them at noon. A new meeting was held in the large command tent. Will they come to Earth? Why did the aliens crash instead of landing? What force were they escaping? These questions filled the room. The air was thick with fear and responsibility. A scientist stood up and delivered the report. Their ship was old and damaged even before entering our atmosphere. It wasn't meant for war or long-distance travel. It was a refugee vessel, and based on their behavior, their enemies are extremely powerful. A general frowned. So Earth could become the next target. Silence followed. Another official spoke quietly. They didn't choose Earth. They didn't bring danger intentionally. They simply ended up here by accident, and now they're terrified that we might hand them back to whatever was chasing them. The generals looked at each other. The decision wasn't simple. Protecting the aliens might lead to war. Not protecting them would be cruel. But every moral instinct, every human instinct, leaned toward helping them. Meanwhile, back in the medical tent, the older alien seemed to gather strength. It pointed to itself, then to the stars, then made a large circle with its hands before bringing them close together. The scientists interpreted this as meaning their species once lived across many places, but now, they were few. Maybe only a tiny group remained. The alien then slowly pointed to the injured children and adults on the beds. Then it gestured outward to the desert, then to the sky, then to the sky, then to Earth's symbol shown earlier. It seemed to be saying something important. A scientist tried drawing a simple story, refugees landing on Earth and being protected. The alien stared at it. Its eyes softened. It placed its hand on the picture gently, almost lovingly. Then it tapped its chest twice, a gesture they had begun to learn meant gratitude. But then, something unexpected and heartbreaking happened. The older alien shook suddenly, its breathing irregular. Doctors rushed over. It tried to sit up but couldn't. It looked around desperately at the younger ones, at the humans, at the tent ceiling. Something deep inside it seemed to break. With weak hands, it reached toward one of the scientists. The scientist stepped closer and gently held its hand, even though she didn't know what gesture she was agreeing to. The alien pressed her hand against its chest, right over where its heart would be. Then it pointed toward the sky again. Is it asking for our protection? The scientist whispered. The alien nodded slowly. Then it closed its eyes and rested again. Exhausted from the effort of communicating, the human officials outside didn't need more proof. It was clear. These aliens were running from something so deadly that it destroyed their world. They had nowhere else to go. Earth was their last hope. That afternoon, the government released a quiet internal order. The aliens were not to be treated as prisoners. They were to be treated as survivors in need of protection. The news slowly spread through the base. Soldiers relaxed their posture slightly. Nurses checked on the aliens more gently. Scientists worked harder to learn their language. Something like compassion started to grow across the entire camp. But the most emotional moment came at sunset. When the sky above Arizona turned orange and pink, the older alien, now slightly stronger, walked a few steps outside the tent with help. It looked at the sky silently. The humans around it respected the moment and didn't interrupt. After a long silence, it lifted one arm and pointed toward the stars, making a slow circle as if showing space itself. Then it placed its hand over its heart and bowed its head. It was morning. Morning, its home, its people, its past. A soldier standing nearby swallowed hard, feeling his chest tighten with emotion. He had never thought aliens could feel heartbreak the same way humans did, but watching that being silently mourn under the glowing sky made him understand just how similar they truly were. That night, When the stars filled the sky again, the truth settled deeply among the humans. These refugees weren't enemies. They weren't dangerous. They weren't invaders. They were victims running from a brutal, merciless power somewhere in the universe. And now, by accident or fate, they had fallen into the hands of a species they had never met before. Humans don't, and for reasons no one could yet explain, humanity's first instinct had been to protect them. Slowly, quietly, Earth began to realize something important. If these aliens had nowhere else to run, then maybe, just maybe, humanity would have to become their shield. The alien refugees, now slowly healing both in body and spirit, have begun living among the humans who rescued them. They stay inside the underground facility most of the time, but the humans allow them supervised walks, small moments of freedom, and chances to interact with the world they once feared would kill them. Every step they take now feels like a borrowed moment of peace, but that peace is fragile. One early morning, when the sun had just started to color the sky with soft shades of gold, a small group of alien children stood near the entrance of the base, watching birds fly above the forest. They had never seen real birds before. On their destroyed homeworld, most wildlife had vanished long before the war ended. The children listened to the soft chirping, their wide eyes reflecting a mixture of wonder and sadness. One of the scientists guiding them observed quietly, knowing this moment was special. For the children, it was the first time life felt normal again. Meanwhile, deep inside the facility, Riluk and Commander Hale had grown to respect each other. Their connection was unusual, a soldier from another world and a soldier from Earth, both fighting for survival, both carrying heavy scars from battles they never asked for. Hale understood that Riluk had lost almost everything, and Riluk understood that Hale was risking his entire planet for a group of strangers. They met often in a small room where a hologram of the alien refugees' destroyed homeworld was displayed. Each meeting brought new stories, new pieces of honesty, and new trust. That morning, Riluk was explaining the structure of the enemy pursuing them, the Krail Dominion. He stood in front of the hologram, pointing at the red lines that marked the territories the enemy had already consumed. His voice was calm, but the weight of his words hung like a storm cloud. He explained how the Krail never negotiated, never spared survivors, never accepted surrender. Hale listened, arms crossed, slowly absorbing the reality that Earth was now involved in something far bigger than a rescue mission. Riluk paused at one point, staring at the glowing hologram as if he could still hear the cries of his people. "They will come," he said quietly, his voice trembling slightly. "They always come." Hale nodded. "Then we'll be ready." But readiness was easier said than done. Earth had never faced enemies like the Krail, even with advanced alien technology recovered from the crashed ship. The humans had only limited understanding of how it worked. Engineers worked day and night, testing weapons, analyzing shielding systems, attempting to merge alien tech with Earth-built machines. Some systems functioned beautifully, others exploded without warning. The learning process was messy, dangerous, and filled with setbacks. A team of human engineers, accompanied by 2 alien technicians, spent hours trying to connect the ship's energy core to an external generator. It hummed with an unstable rhythm, making a vibration that shook tools off nearby tables. One wrong calibration could level the entire facility. Yet they worked together tirelessly, holding the fragile alliance between species with both cooperation and hope. But trouble was already approaching. Late that afternoon, while the human soldiers were practicing defensive drills and the alien refugees were resting in their quarters, the facility's early warning system flickered once. Just a brief, tiny flicker. No alarm, no noise, just a near-invisible glitch. A technician tapped the screen, confused. Everything looked normal. He shrugged and went back to his work. If he had looked 1 second longer, he would have seen a faint signal at the very edge of Earth's atmosphere, a ripple of energy that didn't belong to anything human. Night fell over the base. The forest outside became dark and still, except for the occasional rustle of animals moving through the leaves. A soft breeze passed through the tall trees bordering the hidden entrance of the facility. The humans on guard duty chatted quietly, unaware that far above them, in the silence of space, something was watching. Inside the base, Riluk walked through the halls with slow steps, thinking about his people. He passed by the room where the children slept, where families clung together for warmth and safety. Some of them still woke up screaming from nightmares. Some still whispered prayers in their native language, hoping their dead loved ones could somehow hear them. Riluk stopped for a moment, his heart tightening. He wanted to give them a future. He wanted Earth to be the place where they could rebuild everything they had lost. When he reached the observation room, he found Hale staring at the stars through the large reinforced window. The human commander didn't turn around when Riluk entered. He simply continued staring at the sky, his expression thoughtful. "You're worried," Riluk said softly. Hale gave a slight smile. "I'd be lying if I said I wasn't." "You're risking everything for us," Riluk said, stepping closer. "Your planet, your people. They didn't ask for this." "No," Hale replied. "But you didn't ask for war either." Silence hovered between them. It was a silence filled with understanding. Hours passed quietly until the base lights dimmed into nighttime mode. Most people, human and alien, were asleep when the first faint tremor shook the ground. It felt like a vehicle passing far away, barely noticeable. The tremor faded before anyone reacted. A few minutes later, another tremor came, this time stronger. A cup sitting on a scientist's desk rattled and fell over, spilling cold coffee onto scattered papers. Hale rushed through the hallway, barking orders. Soldiers ran to their positions. Engineers scrambled to shut down volatile equipment. The alien families were guided to secure rooms, some staring in confusion, others trembling in fear because trembling ground was something they remembered from bombings back home. Rilak knew before anyone else what the tremors meant. His skin grew cold, his pulse quickened, and his mind whispered a truth he did not want to accept. The enemy was here. He hurried to the control room, arriving just as technicians struggled to interpret strange energy readings. One of them turned pale. "Something is entering the atmosphere," he said. "But it's not a meteor." The main screen flickered. For a second, static replaced everything. Then the image sharpened. A massive silhouette appeared against the dark sky, an enormous ship unlike anything humans had ever seen before. Spikes of metal armor jutted from its sides. Rings of glowing energy formed a halo around it, pulsing like a heartbeat. It moved with slow, terrifying purpose, descending directly toward Earth. The room fell silent. Rilak stepped forward, his voice barely a whisper. "Krail Scout, Destroyer." Hale's jaw tightened. "How bad?" Rilak's eyes darkened. "One of these wiped out 3 cities on my world in a single night." Fear crashed over the room like a cold wave. The alarm sirens finally activated, echoing through the entire facility. Deep crimson lights flashed on the walls. Humans and aliens clung to each other in panic. The ground shook again, harder this time, as the enemy ship pierced deeper into the atmosphere, leaving a blazing trail across the sky. Outside, soldiers rushed to defensive turrets. Energy shields flickered to life around the base, shimmering like translucent blue walls. Engineers scrambled to power up the alien tech cannons mounted on a nearby ridge. The air smelled of burning metal and raw tension. The alien families were locked inside fortified shelters. Some screamed, some prayed, some held onto each other so tightly their hands turned pale. Rilak and Hale stood together in the command center, staring at the enemy ship descending above the forest. Neither of them looked away. Neither blinked. "What will they do?" Hale asked quietly. Rilak swallowed. "They won't attack immediately. They'll scan first. They will search for survivors of my people. If they detect us, they will." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. A sudden flash of light erupted from the ship's underside like a dozen suns igniting at once. A beam shot downward, scanning the ground with terrifying precision. It passed over mountains, rivers, valleys, and then moved closer to the hidden facility. Hale's voice boomed over the intercom. "All units prepare for impact." But the beam kept moving. At the last second, the energy shields flickered again, this time absorbing a faint ripple. They detected something. A technician whispered. Rilak clenched his fists. "They found us." The Krail ship descended, lower engines roaring. Trees bent under the force of its gravitational pull. Birds scattered in frantic clouds of wings. Animals fled the forest in every direction. The sky glowed red beneath the burning engine trails. The first blast hit. It wasn't a direct strike, just a warning shot, but it slammed into the outer shield like a meteor, sending shockwaves through the base. Lights flickered. People screamed. Consoles sparked and smoked. Hale braced himself against a railing. "That was a warning." "Yes," Rilak said, voice shaking. "They want to intimidate us first." The second blast came seconds later, closer and stronger. The shield held, but cracks of unstable energy spread across it like lightning. "We can't take many hits like that," Hale muttered. "They won't stop," Rilak replied. "Not unless we make them." Hale turned sharply. "Are you saying we fight?" Rilak nodded slowly. "You saved us. You gave us shelter. Now we stand with you." The command center filled with tension and fear, but also a strange sense of unity. Outside, human soldiers stood ready. Alien technicians rushed to the weapons platform. Engineers made last-second calibrations. Everyone, Terran and alien, stood together under the darkening sky. The Krail ship lowered again. The ground shook. The shield cracked further, and for the first time since arriving on Earth, the alien refugees realized they weren't running anymore. They were defending their new home, and Earth was defending them. The moment of collision was coming fast, and both species knew the next attack could decide everything. The Terrans had become their only shield, and now that shield was about to be tested. The sun had just disappeared behind the mountains, leaving a dark, cold night over the desert base. Stars twinkled faintly above, but their light was nothing compared to the bright, humming engines of the Krail destroyer that hovered silently over the facility. For a moment, everything seemed frozen: the humans, the aliens, the trees, the desert itself, as if the world were holding its breath before a storm. Inside the command center, Rilak and Hale stared at the massive silhouette of the enemy ship, its metal surface glinting under the facility's floodlights. They both knew this was the beginning, not the end. The Krail had found them. The moment of war had arrived. Outside the shielded perimeter, The ground shook constantly from the ship's energy pulses. Trees bent under the invisible pressure, sand whipped into the air, and small rocks bounced across the desert floor. Even with the shields active, the base felt like it might collapse under the force of the Krall's presence. Soldiers ran to their posts, checking weapons and loading cannons, while engineers monitored energy levels and rerouted power to the shields. Every flicker of light or humming sound could mean disaster. Inside the medical tents, the alien refugees huddled together, eyes wide and hearts pounding. The children whispered quietly to their parents, mimicking the gestures they had learned over the past few days. They had begun to understand that the humans were protecting them, but they had also learned enough to know that their enemies were relentless. The fear in their eyes was raw and real. The older aliens tried to comfort them, stroking their heads, holding their hands, and whispering in a language the humans didn't understand but could sense as soothing. Rilak paced in the command center. He had been trained for battle, but nothing on Earth had prepared him for this. The Krall destroyer wasn't just large, it was terrifyingly advanced. Its energy beams alone could destroy an entire city. Its shields were stronger than anything humans had built, and its sensors could detect movement from miles away. Yet, as he studied the holographic projections, he realized the aliens had left behind one last desperate measure, an emergency defensive beacon hidden in the heart of their ship. It had not yet been activated. If they could manage to reach it, it might give Earth a chance. But activating it was a gamble. Nobody knew what the effect would be, or if it would even work. Hale turned to Rilok. "Do you think it can stop them?" he asked quietly. His voice was calm but tense. The commander of the base was well aware of the stakes. One wrong move, and thousands of lives, human and alien alike, could be lost in an instant. Rilok shook his head. "It might, or it might make things worse. But it's the only chance we have." The Krall ship made the first move. A bright, deadly beam shot from the destroyer's underside, slicing across the desert floor just beyond the base. It struck with terrifying precision, sending boulders and sand flying like missiles. Soldiers braced behind barriers, and the shields flickered violently as they absorbed the energy. The ground vibrated with the force, making everyone inside the command center feel the reverberations through their bones. "Brace for impact," Hale shouted, gripping the railing. Soldiers on the perimeter ran to the fortified turrets, each heavy weapon powered by a mix of human engineering and alien technology. The aliens who could walk now stood beside the humans, monitoring the weapon systems, guiding aim, and assisting with calibrations. It was a partnership forged in fear and necessity. The children and weaker refugees were moved to deeper shelters, away from danger, while the adults held their hands, whispering reassurances they weren't sure they truly felt. The Krall didn't hesitate. Another energy beam struck, this time aimed higher. It struck the facility's outer shield and created a loud, resonant crackling sound, like lightning tearing through steel. Sparks flew across the ground, and the air smelled sharply of ozone and burning metal. Several defensive cannons immediately fired in retaliation. The missiles arced upward and collided with the enemy's energy shields. For a moment, it seemed as though they were making no difference. The Krall shields absorbed the impact without a scratch. Inside the command center, tension reached a boiling point. Engineers called out readings over the intercom, and soldiers shouted orders to each other. Hale's face was pale but determined. He knew retreat was impossible. If they tried to run, the Krall would annihilate the base. Earth had no reinforcements nearby. That humans had only what they had built in desperation over the past days. Then, one of the alien technicians spoke up. It was the older alien who had survived the crash and guided his people to safety. "The beacon," he said simply, pointing to the hologram of their crashed ship. "It is time," Rilok nodded. "Agreed. We'll activate it now." The team quickly assembled. Hale led the soldiers and human engineers toward the crashed ship, which still smoldered at the center of the crater. The alien technician went with them, guiding the humans through fragile walkways of metal and sand. Sparks and residual energy from the damaged vessel crackled under their feet. The ship's hull was weak in places, and one wrong step could trigger a collapse as they approached. A second Krall beam streaked across the sky, striking a hill nearby. Rocks and debris exploded outward, and a soldier barely dodged a falling boulder. Hale yelled for everyone to keep moving. The aliens assisting them pointed to the energy core deep inside the ship. It was glowing faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. Rilok and the older alien worked together to open the protective casing. Panels of alien metal shifted and slid with soft clicks, revealing the core, a glowing sphere surrounded by intricate circuits and energy nodes. The humans stared in awe at the strange technology. It was unlike anything they had seen. Blue and gold light flowed in patterns that seemed alive, almost organic. The older alien touched the sphere carefully, speaking words in his native language that Rilok only partially understood. The core responded, lights intensifying and a soft hum vibrating through the ground. Hale took a deep breath. "Is it ready?" he asked. The alien technician nodded. "Yes, but it must be synced with the base shields. If not, everything may collapse." The engineers worked quickly, connecting the alien core to Earth's defensive grid. The core's energy flowed through the cables, merging alien technology with human shields, creating a lattice of energy that extended outward in a faint glowing dome. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the Krail ship fired again. The beam struck the dome. The shields absorbed it, but this time something extraordinary occurred. Their energy rebounded. The beam ricocheted, striking the Krail destroyer's hull with incredible force. Sparks and smoke erupted from the enemy ship as it rocked violently in the sky. The humans cheered quietly. Their gamble had worked. The aliens looked at the display, astonished. They had never seen such power in cooperation with another species. Relax's hand rested briefly on Hale's shoulder. "It's working," he whispered. But the battle was far from over. The Krail ship had not been destroyed. It recovered quickly, firing multiple energy pulses simultaneously. The shields held, but cracks began forming under the strain. Engineers frantically rerouted power, while soldiers fired everything they had. Cannons and missiles lit the night sky, some striking the enemy, some failing to make contact. The aliens, now fully participating, directed human turrets with precision they had learned from centuries of war. They shouted coordinates, pointed, and adjusted aim. One young alien climbed a small platform beside a turret, firing energy projectiles using human weapons, his small frame almost invisible against the barrage of destruction. Soldiers stared in disbelief. This alien was more accurate than any human. Inside the command center, alarms blared continuously. Energy levels fluctuated. Screens displayed enemy ships approaching from further out. But every time the Krail fired, the rebounding energy from the alien beacon struck back, causing explosions on their vessels. The humans had turned a desperate defensive position into a counterattack. Hours passed in a blur of light, fire, sound, and fear. The sky was ablaze with energy beams and exploding missiles. The desert itself seemed alive with the power of war. Dust and sand whirled in great clouds as small tremors shook the earth from distant impacts. Humans and aliens alike worked tirelessly, ignoring fatigue and fear. At one point, a Krail energy pulse broke through part of the shield, striking a building near the edge of the facility. Hale sprinted toward the damage, shouting for the injured to be pulled back. The alien technician followed, helping coordinate emergency repairs. Sparks flew from broken circuits as they worked to restore the shield. The refugees watched from protected areas, fear evident but hope beginning to emerge. Then came the turning point. The alien core, now fully integrated with human technology, released a massive pulse of energy. It was unlike anything Earth had ever seen. Waves of pure power radiated outward, striking the Krail flagship directly. The energy seemed to dissolve their shields, crack their armor, and destabilize their engines. The enemy ship shook violently, unable to maintain control. Smaller ships in formation nearby collided or were pushed back by the force. The humans and aliens held their positions, watching in disbelief as the once dreaded enemy began to falter. Soldiers cheered, but carefully, because they knew the Krail could recover at any moment. The older alien stood beside Relok, his eyes reflecting relief and astonishment. For the first time, he allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, they had survived. Minutes later, the Krail flagship veered sharply upward, retreating from Earth's atmosphere. Smaller vessels followed, leaving streaks of light as they fled back toward space. The human defenses continued firing until the last enemy ship disappeared beyond the horizon. Silence fell over the desert. For the first time since the arrival of the Krail, no energy beams cut the night sky. No tremors shook the ground. Only the hum of the alien core and the heavy breathing of humans and aliens filled the air. The base had survived. The refugees had survived. Humanity had survived. And for the first time, both species realized something profound. Together they could protect one another. Together they could fight back. Together they could survive. As the adrenaline faded, Hale turned to Relok. "We did it," he said quietly. Relok nodded, though his hands still shook. "For now," he said, "they will return. And next time, we must be ready." The aliens looked around, slowly realizing that this planet, which had seemed so strange and foreign just days ago, was now their home. These humans who had saved them, fought with them, and trusted them were their only shield. And Earth, for the first time, had become a true sanctuary in a dangerous galaxy. The night passed slowly. Fires were extinguished. Damaged equipment was repaired. The refugees were tended to, and for the first time, some smiled, cautiously. Children slept soundly, feeling the presence of protection for the first time since leaving their homeworld. Parents whispered quietly, hugging their children, giving thanks in a language only they could understand. Above, the stars watched silently, as if acknowledging that Earth had taken its first step into a new reality, a reality where humans and aliens could stand together against threats from beyond the stars. Asterisk, the first light of dawn painted the desert sky with soft pinks and golds, a stark contrast to the chaos of the night before. The Krail fleet had retreated, but the threat still lingered somewhere out in space. Inside the base, humans and aliens moved cautiously, helping each other repair damage, tend to injuries, and restore order. There was exhaustion in the air, but also a quiet sense of victory. The aliens, once terrified and mistrustful, were beginning to feel that this world might be different. Maybe here they could find peace. Relok walked among the alien refugees, checking on families and children. He had spent nights awake, haunted by memories of the destruction of his homeworld. But now, standing in a place where humans had fought for their survival as fiercely as he had for his people, he felt something he had not felt in a long time: hope. The humans had saved them when no one else could. They had fought alongside them, shared their fears, and risked everything for strangers from the stars. It was almost unimaginable. Hale moved through the facility as well, coordinating repairs and ensuring the defenses remained operational. His mind was already thinking ahead, planning for the next possible attack. The Krail might have retreated for now, but they were patient, relentless hunters. Earth had survived the first test, but it would not be the last. Hale understood that fully, yet he also understood something else. This victory had created a bond between species that could never be broken. In the central medical tent, alien children were playing quietly with human children, using toys that engineers and volunteers had built out of spare parts. For the first time since they had arrived, laughter filled the air, mingling with the soft hum of medical machines and distant conversations. The older aliens watched, their expressions softening. They had lived through unimaginable horror, but these small moments reminded them that life could still be beautiful, that peace could still exist. Relak approached the older alien technician who had guided the refugees through the crash. "Do you think they will come back?" he asked quietly, glancing at the repaired defenses outside. The technician shook his head slowly. "The Krail will return eventually. They always do, but they will remember what they faced tonight. They will think twice about attacking this world directly." He paused, then added, "And we will be ready." Hale joined them, nodding. "We'll make sure of that. We've learned a lot. The humans and aliens working together. That's something they didn't expect. They won't underestimate us again." Rilok looked around at the humans, at their faces filled with determination and courage. For a long moment he thought about his homeworld, about the families and friends lost, about the cities destroyed. Pain still lived inside him, but it was now tempered with gratitude. Gratitude for these humans who had stood as their shield. Gratitude for the chance to rebuild, even on a foreign planet. Throughout the day, engineers and soldiers worked side by side with aliens, repairing the base and enhancing its defenses. They moved swiftly, efficiently, and with a sense of shared purpose. Each completed task was a reminder that survival was not just about strength or weapons, it was about unity, trust, and courage. The base that had been a temporary refuge was beginning to feel like a real home, a sanctuary for beings who had nowhere else to go. Outside the facility, the desert returned to its quiet state, though the scorched marks from the previous night's battle remained. Trees were broken, rocks were scattered, and the sand bore deep impressions from energy blasts. Still, the humans and aliens worked to clean and repair as much as possible. Each repair was symbolic, a testament to their ability to survive and adapt. Even the children helped in small ways, carrying tools, picking up debris, and learning from their protectors. As the sun climbed higher, the older aliens gathered the younger ones for a lesson in caution and survival. They explained the importance of staying together, of trusting those who had proven themselves allies, and of remembering the past without letting it destroy the future. The humans observed quietly, realizing that while they had been the defenders, they had also learned much from the resilience, wisdom, and courage of the aliens. In the command center, Rilok and Hale reviewed the defensive systems one last time. The alien beacon was fully integrated with Earth's shields, its energy capable of repelling large-scale attacks or redirecting enemy fire. It was a fragile piece, dependent on cooperation and constant vigilance, but it was a piece nonetheless. Hale looked at Rilok, a faint smile forming despite exhaustion. "We did it," he said. "For now, and we'll be ready when the next test comes." Rilok nodded, feeling a rare warmth in his chest. "Your species, your people, you are stronger than I thought. You can be trusted." Hale chuckled softly. "We learned from you too. We're not as different as we thought." The day slowly turned into evening, and the base settled into a calmer rhythm. Families, human and alien, shared meals, exchanged stories, and began to feel that connection which comes from surviving together. The children played games that combined human and alien traditions, laughing as they invented new rules and learning about each other's worlds. Parents watched, quietly amazed at the resilience and adaptability of youth, who could find joy even after the deepest trauma. Rilok took a walk along the perimeter of the base, accompanied by Hale. The desert stretched endlessly before them, quiet and unyielding. The two men looked at the horizon, thinking of the stars and the vastness beyond. Somewhere out there, the Krail were regrouping, planning their next attack. But tonight, Earth had won a small, hard-fought victory, and that victory was enough to kindle hope. Hal broke the silence. "Do you think your people will ever forgive themselves for what happened?" Rilok shook his head slowly. "No, and perhaps they should not. But they will learn to move forward, and they will not be alone anymore." The two men stood in silence, watching the sun set and the stars appear. It was a moment of reflection, of quiet understanding. The battle had been won, but But the war of survival in the universe was far from over. Yet for the first time, humans and aliens had stood together and proven that unity could overcome even the most terrifying odds. As night deepened, the alien families gathered in a central courtyard. They lit small fires, a tradition from their homeworld, symbolizing remembrance and hope. Each flame represented a memory of those they had lost and a promise to protect those who remained. The humans joined them, cautiously at first, then fully, understanding the weight and meaning of the ritual. Together, the flames glowed brightly, casting light across the desert and illuminating a symbol of shared survival and trust. The children, both human and alien, stared at the fires in wonder. They asked questions about the stars, about distant worlds, about the lives their alien friends had led before coming to Earth. The adults answered as best they could, knowing that these questions were not just curiosity. They were the first steps in building understanding between two species. Through these conversations, trust deepened, bonds strengthened, and the seeds of a lasting alliance were planted. Deep inside the base, Rilok and the older alien technician worked together to enhance communication systems. They devised a method that allowed both humans and aliens to understand each other more effectively, combining language, symbols, and gestures. This was not just about survival, it was about creating a shared future. They were laying the foundation for something much larger than either species had experienced, a partnership built on mutual respect and necessity. As the night wore on, Hale walked through the sleeping quarters, quietly observing the aliens who had been so frightened just days ago. They now rested more peacefully, some sleeping side by side with humans, a sign that fear was slowly being replaced by trust. He smiled faintly, knowing that while the Krail threat remained, the bond between species had become unbreakable. Above the desert, the stars shone brightly. Somewhere far away, the Krail fleet was retreating, perhaps reconsidering their approach after the unexpected resistance. Earth had survived, and its defenders, both human and alien, had shown courage, ingenuity, and resilience. The alliance had been forged in fire, and now it glowed like a beacon across the darkness of space. In the early hours before dawn, Rilok and Hallie stood together at the observation deck. They looked at the stars, and then at the sleeping base below. Hale broke the silence. "We'll be ready next time. Whatever comes," Rilok nodded, "and we will not fight alone. Together we are stronger than anything they can send." For the first time since the aliens had crash-landed, there was true hope. Hope that a destroyed world could be replaced with a new one. Hope that children who had seen war and death could laugh and play again. Hope that Earth could become a sanctuary for those who needed protection. And most importantly, hope that together, humans and aliens could survive, protect each other, and perhaps even thrive. The desert was quiet once more. Fires burned softly in the courtyard. Children slept peacefully. Adults watched over them, and somewhere above, the stars twinkled in silent approval. Earth had become a shield. Humanity had become a protector, and the alien refugees, who had once run in fear across the galaxy, had finally found a home. The night slowly gave way to the first light of a new day, carrying with it the promise of survival, unity, and hope for the future. The scars of battle remained, but so did the knowledge that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, trust, courage, and cooperation could create a light strong enough to guide two species into a shared destiny. And for the first time in a long time, Rilok allowed himself to believe that the future could be bright.